Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to day 2 of the Depression on College Campuses Conference, addressing the dual pandemic, the impact of COVID-19 and racial injustice on college student mental health. I hope that you all left yesterday just as energized as I did, and I look forward to some more great sessions today. A few quick reminders before we get started. If you need continuing education credits, please remember to sign in and out of your sessions using the polls and complete evaluations for each session you attend, along with the overall conference evaluation at the end of the day. Please also remember to visit the reception area for the schedule and other important information. Check out the speed networking and stop by the expo area to find a copy of the full conference program, the virtual resource table. And today we have added the posters there if you missed the session last night. I also wanted to note, along with the speed networking, another way that you can connect with folks is through the direct messages. So if you'll see the little arrow at the top, you can tell if you have a message, if you want to connect with somebody, and you can follow up with folks that you meet at speed networking as well. And as always, feel free to ask your Depression Center moderators any questions throughout the day. With that, I'm pleased to get started. As we talked about yesterday, it's so important to center student voices. I'm especially excited to be kicking off today with students. First, we get to honor our George Orley Student Mental Health Advocate Award winners, and then we'll move into a panel presentation where we'll get to hear directly from students. So now I'd like to introduce our award presenter and panel moderator, Joy Pelkey. Joy Pelkey is a health educator and the lead for student engagement and academic partnerships at Wolverine Wellness at the University of Michigan. Her interests include creating inclusive culture of well-being on campus, wellness coaching, motivational interviewing, alcohol and other drug prevention and intervention, mindfulness, social justice, and health equity, healthy relationships, and sleep hygiene for the collegiate population. Joy believes in the power of looking at wellness holistically and interculturally. A holistic approach allows us to address and attend to the expected and unexpected fluctuations in life and build resilience for the times in our lives that challenge us. Joy also believes that wellness does not look like what the media tells us, and we must critically examine our health and wellness efforts to address who is being left out. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you, Stephanie. I am so honored to be a part of this award presentation today. The Depression on College Campuses Conference has been a part of my life the entire time I've been at Michigan. And I do think that when we talk about mental health advocates, it's just so critical to have the student voice. You know, we who are professionals in mental health and well-being, we know our impact, but it's been so obvious to me over the years that it's the peers that make the big difference. And I've been so impressed by the award winners and nominees each year. And I've been lucky to work with so many of them and just feel so honored to be a part of this. So thank you for inviting me to do this. I am going to read the background for the award now. So the George Orley Student Mental Health Advocate Award is to recognize outstanding student leadership in the area of campus mental health. The University of Michigan initiated the Student Mental Health Advocate Award in 2007. Since 2009, the selection committee has presented 2 awards, one to a student from the University of Michigan and one to a student from another school, allowing us to honor student advocacy around the country as well as on our own campus. The undergraduate and graduate students who have been nominated from across the country for this prestigious award have all made a significant impact in their campus communities by raising awareness of mental health issues, advocating for mental health services on campus, and helping to reduce the stigma of depressive illnesses. In 2019, Randy and Diane Orley of Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, along with their children, Amanda and Sam Orley, established an endowment at the university to fund this award in perpetuity. The George Orley Student Mental Health Advocate Award is named to honor the memory of Randy and Diane's son and Amanda and Sam's brother, George, who lost his battle with depression prior to his junior year at the University of Michigan in August 2013. Since losing George, the Orley family has devoted time, energy, and resources to strengthen supports for young people struggling with mental health issues. And for their tireless advocacy and for their generous support in funding this award, we extend our great gratitude to Randy, Diane, Amanda, and Sam Orley. And if Sam's out there, hi Sam. Okay. So I'd like to start out by acknowledging all of the nominated students and thanking them for their work. And I know that some of them are here today. So Hai Win Win from the University of Texas at Southwestern. All the nominees can imagine all the people in their houses clapping and celebrating you. So Hai Win Win from the University of Texas at Southwestern. Macy Faust from the University of North Texas, Denton. Liadin Solomon from the University of Michigan. Matthew Jersa from the University of Michigan. Ananya Cletus from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, who will also be part of the student panel immediately following the awards presentation. And Tran Dome from the University of Michigan, who will also be part of the student panel. Congratulations on being nominated. I now have the pleasure of announcing our first awardee, Michael Shahowski from the University of Delaware, and I'm going to read his nomination. Michael is a senior at the University of Delaware studying philosophy. In October of 2020, Sean's House was created as a nonprofit 24/7 mental health safe haven located on the University of Delaware's campus. Sean's House provides peer support to teens and young adults struggling with mental health issues free of charge, with a focus on suicide prevention. The overwhelming support Sean's House has received thus far is remarkable, and much of the success wouldn't be possible without Michael. He jumped at the opportunity to be a peer support specialist and completed weeks of training to volunteer his time helping those who have been struggling, especially during the pandemic. Due to COVID-19, many of the volunteers were unable to donate their time. Michael saw the impact this would have on Sean's House's ability to provide services to the community, and he stepped up in a tremendous way. Michael has donated over 200 hours in the past few months and has helped to serve over 500 individuals since the opening of Sean's House. He has played an integral role in training the next cohort of peers, providing additional resources to offer guests, and has even volunteered covering night shifts, which makes the 24/7 program even possible. Michael's compassion and natural ability to help others has made lasting impressions on every guest who has walked through the doors. He treats everybody with empathy and sincerity and provides the safe space that many teens and young adults need to feel comfortable sharing their experiences. His dedication to improving mental health outcomes for his peers is truly inspiring, and he will continue changing the lives of many as he enters graduate school. And as his mentor, she is honored to nominate Michael for this award. Congratulations, Michael.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, and thank you, Joy, for that very nice introduction. I just want to give thanks first to the Orley family, Amanda, Sam, Diane, and Randy, who started this award, as well as the George Orley Mental Health Initiative. I didn't know of the initiative until my friends at Sean's House, the mental health organization I work for, nominated me for the award. But upon reading more about it, I was really happy and grateful to hear that others around the country were taking it upon themselves to address the suffering of mental illness and to reduce the stigma that surrounds it. To them and everyone else here who endeavors to help others, I truly thank you. I also want to thank my friends at Sean's House, Chris, Darian, Tiana, Shannon, Molly, and everyone else that spent their time there, and especially to Tiana and Shannon, who nominated me for the award. I really consider the award to represent an acknowledgement of everyone's efforts at Sean's House, because without Sean's House, I would not have had the privilege of providing support to those that struggle with mental illness. And without these incredible people, there would be no Sean's House. So I thank you all once again, and I hope everyone here enjoys the rest of the day, the panels, and finds inspiration to be compassionate and be brave to speak about mental illness. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm now very happy to announce our University of Michigan awardee, Sarah Abelson, who I get to work with and have the pleasure of seeing her incredible impact. Currently working on the Graduate Student Mental Health Task Force. And I am going to read her nomination letter. Sarah Abelson is a doctoral candidate at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. She is a nationally recognized expert who has dedicated herself to improving student mental health at Michigan and beyond. Sarah's research focuses on student mental health with a particular emphasis on equity. Her advisor, Daniel Eisenberg, describes her as a stellar scholar with a genuine passion for improving how colleges and universities support the development and well-being of college students, and as someone who has made important contributions to college health through advocacy, education, and research. Sarah is a member of the Rackham Graduate School's Task Force on Student Mental Health, leading last year's working group on Rackham level changes and this year's Public Safety and Policing working group, which only exists thanks to her advocacy. She played an integral role in the writing and shaping the task force report, including the recommendations, all of which have been accepted. Sarah has contributed to the U of M inclusion efforts through many channels, including leadership with the Network for Doctoral Diversity. As a graduate student, Sarah has positively impacted student mental health nationally through producing resources for college administrators, such as a Higher Education Today article on centering equity in student mental health task forces, which is their 5th most read article in 2020. She's advised and helped lead student mental health initiatives with the American Council on Education, the Great Lakes Colleges Association, Steve Fund, the National Center for Institutional Diversity, Bringing Theory to Practice, American Cancer Society, and president of the University of Minnesota. She's facilitated collecting important new data on student mental health as the lead for diversity, equity, and inclusion projects for the Healthy Minds Network. Congratulations, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you to the Orley family, to the Depression Center, and to all the organizers of the Depression Oncology's campus, and to Meg, who nominated me. I'm really deeply honored to receive this award. I've had the privilege of getting to know some members of the Orley family over the years, and your dedication to student mental health in the face of such profound personal loss really inspires me. I'm grateful for your choice to invest in student mental health through celebrating student mental health advocates. I've also seen over the years the real heart and soul that goes into presenting this award and conference each year by Trish Meyer, by Stephanie Salazar, by John Graydon, and so many others. And I know that this award also represents your dedication to student mental health advocates, so thank you. Prior to starting my PhD, I served as vice president of the national nonprofit Active Minds, and I participated in nominating several outstanding students for this award. My work is really inspired by past recipients, by several folks who were nominated, and all the students out there who are making such a profound difference on their campuses and for their peers. I have many people to thank. I want to give a huge thanks to Professor Meg Duffy for nominating me and for your role in bringing the Rackham Task Force for Graduate Student Mental Health to life. For those of you who don't know, the Rackham Graduate School supports and oversees graduate education across University of Michigan's many schools and colleges. I've seen too many task forces that are heavy on the talk and light on the action, but I've had such a meaningful experience on this task force. There's really no better group of individuals than those with whom I serve, including you, Joy. So thank you to my fellow task force members for thinking critically, thoughtfully, creatively, and inclusively about the mental health of graduate students who are often forgotten in institutional efforts to address student mental health. Rackham is uniquely and powerfully positioned to help lead and contribute to efforts to better support graduate student mental health. I've been particularly excited to identify opportunities for positive changes to structures, policies, and practices that will shape actions within schools and departments across U of M. I see that colleges and researchers have focused so much on how to change students, how to enhance their coping skills or provide training and mindfulness. And I see so much untapped potential to focus on how we can change our institutions to be healthier places that are more conducive to the mental health and holistic well-being and success for all students. Thank you to the leadership at Rackham, to Dean Solomon and Dr. Verhoot for seizing this opportunity at Rackham, for making key investments to set the task force up for success, and for prioritizing ongoing investments to ensure that impactful, exciting changes emerge from our efforts. I want to give a thank you to my mentors, to Daniel Eisenberg, Cleopatra Caldwell, Tabby Chavis, Christy Gammarell, and Pat Gurin, who've given me the freedom and independence to pursue mental health advocacy alongside my PhD research. I think I'm a better researcher when I'm also immersed in practice, and I'm a better practitioner when I'm also immersed in research. And I'm lucky to have been able to pursue the two side by side as a graduate student, and I'm looking forward to a career combining those things. There's so much brilliant research taking place at institutions of higher education, and I would love to see schools doing more to shape policy and practice based on data on their students, their programs, and where they're falling short and inequities exist. I'm excited about how I'm working with Michigan to do this right now, collecting data to better understand student experiences with police and policing, and to guide efforts to advance public safety on campus. With that, I have to give a quick shout out to the brilliant Healthy Minds team, who does so much to gather critical data on student mental health and well-being, which fuels my research and advocacy. If you're a student at Michigan, you're going to get a survey from Healthy Minds this week, and I hope you fill it out. Your voice and your experiences matter, and I'm going to be doing my darndest to make sure that what you share positively shapes practice here at Michigan for the better. In closing, I just want to thank some folks that have been good for my mental health as a graduate student. My 2 cohort mates and other graduate students in my program. Thanks for being friends, for supporters, and providing a truly outstanding therapist recommendation. Because stigma is still too much of an issue, I want to say loudly and proudly that having a fabulous therapist has been one of the joys of graduate school for me. And if you haven't found the right fit for you yet, keep looking. They're out there, and it really makes a big difference. Thanks to my dear friends in Ann Arbor and elsewhere who have been there for the highs and the lows, the needed processing, the laughter, and so much inspiration. Thanks to my dog, walking you daily brings numerous mental health benefits. And finally, I owe huge thanks to my family, to my parents, sister, and Ray Ray. I'm proud to be an apple that hasn't fallen far from the tree, and I appreciate all the ways you continue to nurture my growth and well-being. To my partner, Ben, never in my wildest imagination would I guess that pursuing a PhD would involve living, working, eating, sleeping, teaching, learning, exercising, and running a daycare with you in one house without ever leaving. But there's no one I'd rather do it with, and I'm so grateful for all that you make possible. And last but not least, huge gratitude to the truly best thing for my mental health, my toddler, Jessie's joy, curiosity, kindness, and laughter. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Congratulations again to Sarah and to Michael. I really appreciate those last few comments, Sarah, about who really contributed to your own mental health and reducing the stigma around therapy. I think it's so important. And again, the student voices is what makes a huge difference. So congratulations to everyone. Thank you so much for all of your words. So we're now going to transition into our student panel, which is really coming from a place of talking about mental health and the dual pandemic of COVID and racism, and really wanting to get student voices. So the student experience, and how we imagine the panel today is that I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves and have them sort of talk a little bit about their overall experiences of the last year. So you'll hear from each of the 5 panelists, and then we'll shift into some moderated questions, sort of going off of some of the themes that come up in what they speak about today. And then you too, as the audience, will be able to ask questions. So please feel free to throw those in the chat. As people are talking, we just might not get to them until that sort of second half. So I am going to just invite students to speak by the order that I have on my paper, which is arbitrary. So just so you know, but Brandon, I'm going to invite you to go first.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Bond. I use the pronouns he, him, his. I am a current first-year graduate student here at the University of Michigan in the School of Public Health and School of Social Work. And I did my undergrad at Michigan as well, so pretty used to this place overall. And I guess going into the overall topic of today's conference and everything, I think considering my own personal identity as being like an African American Black male, in addition to the fields that I listed off being in public health social work, this pandemic with COVID and the racial pandemic overall has been very complex in a way. I don't know like a better word to put it or a better way to put that, but it's been interesting to see how things have changed, how things also have stayed the same, and all of the different gaps in assistance that like are needed and everything like that. And I think specifically going into my own identity and everything, it's been very overwhelming trying to navigate this past year because, of course, growing up, I've learned, I've seen and experienced a lot of the common themes that we've all seen throughout media and through our own personal experiences and things like that in regards to racism and denying the truth and everything like that. But it's been kind of like a non-stop barrage of like all of that at once. So in terms of like the pandemic, since everything has been like shutting down and everything like that, it's been like great to kind of have that moment to take a step back and see my place in the world, what I can do, what I have control of, but it also just showed me how much I don't have control of. And I think for myself, knowing that there's already so much out of my control because of some of my identities, that it kind of put me in the mindset of like, okay, so what can I do? Where can I go? I can't do this or that. So it's been very taxing with that. And then kind of being stuck in one place, but having the world still changing dramatically has also been very impactful and at times harmful, specifically with the murders of many innocent Black lives, such as Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, as well as, a ton of other people as well. And just kind of being stuck, seeing that happen over and over and over again. There's really no escape. So kind of like having that be tied to like your own identity, trying to watch TV, but that's all that's on the news. It's either that or the pandemic. It's always just people passing away from like preventable things, or you go to social media and then everyone is apparently woke now and sees that there's so many injustices and everything. So overall, it's been like very difficult to kind of have that in every aspect of your life. So academically, socially, that's what a lot of people are talking about on the media and everything. It's a lot to get into overall. But then, I guess like we'll get into like a little bit later with the more questions and everything. But I think it's definitely important and has been very taxing on the mental health of a lot of people in general, but specifically Black communities and other communities of color, with everything that's been going on, and recognizing how much help and assistance or just like opportunities is needed for these communities, but it's just never often granted to us. So hopefully we can talk about some strategies and some more things like that throughout your questions and throughout the rest of this panel. But that's enough for me for right now.
Thank you, Brandon. I'm going to invite Ananya to go next.
Hi, so I'm Ananya. I'm a senior in computer science at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I'm also the founder of Anemone, which is a mental health crisis mobile app. And I've been involved in a lot of advocacy on campus, as well as at the national level with companies like Google, the federal government, and spoken a lot, especially about dealing with stigmas in the Indian American community. And I think especially since the pandemic, that sort of thing has gotten a lot worse because everyone is sort of trapped where they are, and people come from a variety of home backgrounds, living environments, and especially for large universities where there are students who are both out of state or who are international, they no longer have access to a lot of mental health services. So I think that's been one of the most difficult parts of the pandemic. And just the feeling of disconnection with everyone. I think like what Brandon was saying, it can be so exhausting just by yourself wherever you are sort of staying at home, but there's like this level of disconnect, whether you're a student or a faculty member, administrator, and to some extent, I think everyone is struggling in their own way. We're all human beings, we're all going through this together, but just through these platforms, it's been really, really hard to connect with people. And, people talk about Zoom burnout, or you go on social media and you see people working out, baking bread, acting like everything is okay, when in reality, it's really not. And so I think even though technology has had its benefits in connecting students with other people, there are definitely a lot of disconnects from between universities and students who are sort of falling through the cracks in the pandemic.
Thanks, Ananya. I appreciate the baking bread comment. I'm going to pass it on to Tran.
Hi there. My name is Tran Doan. I am a doctoral candidate in the Department of Health Management and Policy in the School of Public Health. My research is focused on adolescent depression and whether universal screening could help to prevent and treat and catch adolescent depression and get individuals into care early on, considering that the average age of onset of depression is 14 and that it takes about 8 to 10 years for people to seek treatment. The statistics are alarmingly high, especially in, of course, descendants of color, descendants of the colonized is what I meant to say. And I wanted to also talk a little bit about myself in that I am a daughter of Vietnamese boat refugees and immigrants. I have inherited the intergenerational trauma that they experienced. And despite being born after the war in Vietnam, I still experience some of the ripple effects. I'm not the only one. I know that there's other intergenerational trauma-based contexts, whether it's from rural America or, in many different kind of communities. Wanted to point out some of the racism experiences of Asian and Pacific Islanders recently over the pandemic. And it has been really alarming. It has affected us, I believe. I'm not a representative for the entire community, but I can't imagine not one person being affected by some of these experiences. I also want to mention that these experiences are not new. They're currently being reported, but experiences of racism has been prevalent since I was born and since before that. Experiences with the KKK, with, Vietnamese fishermen in Houston immigrating over, they did what they knew how, which is to fish, and experiences and pushed us into service industries. So a lot of my communities I'm not trying to put any opinion on that, but a lot of my communities is in Vietnamese nail salons and restaurants. And thus, over these past year, I was activated. I was activated as a community member. I was activated as a person that spoke English, considering that 50% of Vietnamese Americans do not speak English well. I was not plagued, but I was burdened by the number of unemployment applications that I had to submit in California, Houston, all around the United States. There's about over 2 million Vietnamese Americans. We're a small group of people. We will always be the minority. It's very difficult to seek help for minority groups, Southeast Asians, considering that individuals who seek help, mental health, about 70% of Southeast Asians have post-traumatic stress. So I just wanted to bring out there that one of the things that I've been very humbled by over this past year was the allyship from other communities of color, especially the Black community. I was very humbled to see comments, especially around defending Vietnamese nail salon workers, saying, they're not Chinese, they're Vietnamese, and really recognizing the power of us helping one another out. Thus, this past year, I really thought about how to align my actions to my values, seriously. I took a lot of pause in my PhD program in terms of having conversations with my advisors, my dissertation advisors. I have activated them and using them for support in ways that I probably wouldn't have pre-pandemic. And I was very gracious and humbled by their support. I know that not everybody is as lucky as I am, but I really appreciate the ability to be vulnerable in front of professors, because this delineation between professional and professionalism, it's just not real. It's not real for me. The work that the live experience that I have had has informed my future experience and the work that I'm doing. And that means the work that I'm doing in my terms of my research around adolescent depression. It means the work that I'm doing in my extracurricular life. And that means that also, in my extracurriculars, I've been teaching yoga for free, trauma-informed yoga for Black Lives. I've been working on a documentary project that is recognizing the intergenerational trauma of Southeast Asian experiences and trying to highlight the revisionist history and the voices of Southeast Asians' perspective of the war in Vietnam, because most of the history I have learned is from a predominantly white American perspective. So this past year has been very humbling. It's been a lot. I just wanted to point out that these experiences of racism is having a moment right now. But I encourage the sustainability of this moment, that the use of anger and frustration is harnessed into some sort of power and good. And that, yeah, I'm grateful for this nomination and this recognition. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chan. You brought up so many important themes, and as each student speaks, I'm tracking some of those themes so that we can loop back to them as well. So thank you. Gila.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gila. I'm a sophomore at the University of Central Florida studying computer science. One of my things I work in terms of mental health is research as well, but in terms of technology. So how can we better diagnose mental illnesses with biophysical signals and data? Alongside this, I work as part of Active Minds. I'm currently one of the chapter presidents, as well as a national student ambassador. So a lot of my experience within the past few semesters working as president has been focusing on how to support other students in terms of both pandemics. It's been really difficult in terms of prioritizing how to help others as well as how to help myself. One of the experiences I'll be touching on later on throughout is my own experience with COVID, as last semester I did contract it, and it ended up turning into one of the worst emergencies that I could ever experience in my life, because following right after I had a mental health crisis. And I think lots of what not just students, but faculty, staff, even families underestimate is the true impact that both of these pandemics can have on student mental health. Social media does not give a good portrayal of it. In fact, I feel that it, in a way, sensationalizes it, even though it brings more awareness to all these issues. Alongside this, especially as a student and that worked as a teacher's assistant for a while, something that I noticed that it's very hard to track when a student has mental health issues, such as having anxiety disorder like myself. So how can you tell through a Zoom platform that someone is having anxiety, like during an interview or during class? How can you tell that they're about to enter a mental health crisis? And so it's been really difficult in terms of trying to educate everyone how to start these conversations, how to continue these conversations, and how to move past these conversations towards objective actions that we can take to address both pandemics. And that's just a little bit about me, and I'm really excited to meet everyone else.
Thanks, Sheila. Pritham?
Hi, my name is Pritham. I'm currently a sophomore at UMich. I'm studying bio and also philosophy. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I honestly felt like I was plucked from campus and plopped straight into my high school bedroom. I saw college as an escape from old routines and like a chance to start something new, start working on myself and like unpacking all the trauma like from high school and stuff. But being back home, all the mind space of growing up and being there like rushed back. I didn't feel safe communicating with my friends about current events and about mental health in the pandemic, especially in my like high school home and like surrounded by parents all the time. And it was a really lonely and isolating mind space. There was a lack of community and I didn't feel like I could reach out. In light of the pandemics, the dual pandemics and health conditions, I felt lots of trauma in my past related to that coming back. Growing in a predominantly white town, I felt like with Black Lives Matter, a lot of microaggressions and things came rushing back. And while all this was rushing back, I was also isolated and felt like I couldn't process it. By internalizing this and stuff and being forced in isolation with no things to go all the way, you're like stuck in your bedroom, your mind goes dwelling. And when it was dwelling, all these like things I used to use to distract myself, like classes, schoolwork, going outside, like being able to see friends all the time, like were gone. And I was forced to confront like whatever health my mental health in general. And so this is a really like crushing, kind of isolating experience that I know a lot of people related to, but there just wasn't much conversation between friends and stuff because of this lack of community. Only by starting to self-reflect and start confronting these feelings I was having in my head, and also by reaching out to friends again, did my mental health start getting better. Being open about the problems I was facing and recognizing that no one could function at top capacity during this time was super important to me. I started being more lenient in all terms of the responsibilities I took on. I was doing a job. I made sure to like reserve time for myself and like be open with my mentors and stuff, that like we all are in a tough place and just having those conversations. And I started rediscovering old hobbies. I forced myself to go out of my room and like instead of sitting there all day, I actually like started baking and stuff. Like I know none of you mentioned that. Hiking. I started gardening. I was stuck in my room for like a good like 2 months, even afraid to go outside because my parents like and stuff like that because COVID. And I started forcing myself to go out and jog, get more exercise and stuff. And I learned it's okay not to be busy all the time. Taking a step back from social media in general and Twitter and seeing the constant barrage of like things on your feed about doom scrolling and stuff, I think is the term. Burnout during this time felt so much worse than usual, and taking a step back from social media really helped like refocus on myself and recenter myself. When school started again, my professors were essential in making sure that like our mental health was better. One of the most like helpful experiences was actually in a race and ethnicity class I took at UMich, and we discussed race in context of opera. But being able to defocus from just like all the current events and centering it around like a topic that's so obscure like opera and stuff, we were really able to connect fields of studies and talk about how we all were feeling in light of both pandemics. And by the professor being open and lenient and flexible with deadlines and open in conversation with her students, she really empathized and shared her own struggles and made us all feel heard. During this pandemic and during this virtual world, that fostered a sense of community that was essential and really helped like make me look forward to going to a Zoom class for once. So I just wanted to mention that a little, like you guys and the professors and the faculty and stuff have a huge impact on us. And I know the same is true. And being able to facilitate these conversations is really important. And I think like that's one topic we're thinking about talking later. So thank you.
Thank you, Preetham. So some of the themes, so I invite the audience to ask questions. You can throw them in the chat and we will ask as many as we can. But one of the themes that all of you mentioned was kind of the overwhelm, exhaustion, and trauma from sort of the idea that COVID was new, but that racism isn't new, right? It's sort of being raised to the forefront. And there's almost like a frustration, like, oh, you're just seeing it now. Similar to mental health, right? But the mental health issues also already existed, and most, if not all, are exacerbated by by COVID. And so, sort of going off of that, I think Preetham started to go into this, but what has helped? And I think when I say that, I don't just mean self-care, because I know that also still puts the burden on you, right? You have to now take care of yourself amidst all of this exhaustion and trauma, right? So it's like for the audience, for folks who are, yes, instructors, advisors, counselors, what sort of going off of what Preetham started to say, what has helped, or what even little things are making a difference moving forward?
I think the first thing that comes to mind really is just dialogue about it, and not just about mental well-being, but also about mental illness. And I think there's a difference there because everyone is so excited to talk about self-care and yoga and meditation, but no one wants to talk about, like the ugly stuff, mania, panic attacks, stuff like that. And I think especially mental health crises have just been increasing since the pandemic started. And it is so important to talk about those kind of things. Even before the pandemic, I had to take some time off from school because I was struggling a lot with mental health crises, and it was experience after experience with the police showing up, being hospitalized, and no one wanted to talk about it. It was such a taboo topic. And it's kind of silly because growing up, we'd learn about things like CPR, the Heimlich maneuver, stop, drop, and roll, all these things about what to do in an emergency. But then when it comes to a mental health emergency, nobody wants to talk about it. And so I think it's more than just talking about well-being. It's talking about mental illness. It's talking about the things that build up to a mental health crisis. And I think, like Preetham was saying, that's even harder now when there's this disconnect on Zoom. But I think really just talking about it, whether in the classroom setting, normalizing needing help, because I think everyone needs help. It doesn't matter if you're a student or a professor, just normalizing that it's all right if you're struggling.
I'd like to bounce off of what she said, because I think normalizing that conversation is very important, and just trying to actively engage with students. Like, what's the best way for me to reach out to you if I notice something is wrong? For example, my research director, every time I'm in a meeting, I'm usually known to be very energetic, very loud. And so even just the smallest hint that I'm tired and I'm not having that same energy, he'll reach out to me separately, be like, hey, are you okay? You don't seem like yourself. And this is a very small thing for him to do. And he really doesn't have to do that. But even when I say I'm just tired today, he'll continue to push forward and ask if I truly am okay or if I need to talk more. And he'll take that extra time to talk with me. So I think it's important to take students seriously when they're saying that they're feeling more than just tired or they're feeling overwhelmed. Additionally, just some of my professors in general have taken time to work out with me if they can notice that I'm not feeling at my greatest, if I need more time on my assignments or if I need more time to prepare for a test, because they know that I prioritize my academics, but I have to prioritize myself first. In general, there's just a lot of little things that instructors, advisors can do that can really support that conversation. It can be as simple as when you're talking about a syllabus, having mental health resources on the syllabus. It's actually quite surprising when I see that our counseling and psychological services isn't on someone's syllabus. Like, what's the best way? And lots of students don't realize that even at least at our counseling center, you can't call them if someone's experiencing an actual mental health emergency. And yet they aren't aware of this. So also integrating into student curriculum, I know for our recreation wellness center, employees usually have to go through first aid training. So including that mental health first aid training is very important as well, because lots of students and even faculty believe that there should be a very large delineation between what a student can do and cannot do, because then it gets too sensitive. But if we're too afraid of that line, then students won't be prepared to handle the situations that come ahead.
And I would say from my perspective, some things that have helped or could help potentially is I feel like there's like a lot of focus on building a lot of different programs, activities, and things like that, but the quality of those programs isn't necessarily the thing that's been the focus as like much as it probably should be, because I know especially here at Michigan, like we have tons of different initiatives, groups, and stuff like that, but they don't always, I guess, like cater to like what people necessarily always need overall. So I think like focusing on the quality of these initiatives and things is a lot more important than like the quantity of it as well. So just like recognizing like where are the commonalities, like people say all the time, like you don't need to reinvent the wheel if it's already there and everything. So I think we need to take that approach and apply it to a lot of other things and like think more creatively or with more innovation in these approaches. I think another thing, this is more, I guess, like for the faculty that might be in the audience, is it is okay to do less. Please just take that in for a second. Like, it's great to want to help students in a lot of different ways and everything, but even thinking about that, it can sometimes be overwhelming. I'm sure for yourself as well. So in thinking about group projects and everything, yes, it's great that you want us to be social, to interact with people from different fields and within our department and everything. But the unintended consequence of that is that now we have another hour-long meeting outside of this class, on top of homework, on top of 6 other classes, on top of working, taking care of family members and XYZ other responsibilities. So that overall can be a little bit more draining than helpful overall. So I think right now, sometimes I think like a lot of people think like doing less means that you aren't trying or that you're not putting in like effort or anything like that, but that's not always how it is. I think that kind of goes back to the point made about just like having discussions about what people expect, what people need from the very beginning of like the semester of the year or something like that, or with administration and stuff like that. Because yes, doing less sometimes is exactly what people need. And it's not saying like our education is going to be worse off or anything like that, but it's going to help overall because we're able to sustain our energy for a lot longer and actually pay attention. Because I'm sure a lot of people have noticed that in certain classes, all cameras are off. You ask a simple question like, "Hi, how's your day?" And there's not a single response. that's the issue. Clearly people are burnt out, they're not engaged and everything. So giving them a little less is sometimes super helpful. And also going off the actions and discussions is when we have these discussions, in my opinion, that's not enough, especially when it comes to racism and a lot of other issues, is that from my perspective, these discussions are not new. They have been happening for centuries now. Like everyone, I haven't heard like a single new point necessarily in like the past year or so. So these discussions are always the same, but I feel like we always have these discussions, but we never have the actions to actually do something about it. So yes, okay, we understand that there is racism, but like, what are we doing to fix it? We understand people are burnt out, but what are we doing to make those accommodations? If we just hear like, I hear you, I empathize with you or sympathize, then nothing changes, then it really doesn't matter. Like either, I don't really care if you hurt me or not, like if you don't do something about it. And it's like, you don't have to do it alone. We can work together and make a plan. But if we don't take steps, what's the point of having the discussion in the first place? Because yeah, it just doesn't do anything. And I think especially now, like a lot of people don't recognize that it's not just procrastination and laziness that's leads to like students' work ethic and everything like that, but there is an immense amount of grief and instability and uncertainty about what's happening in the future. And being able to provide those new perspectives of those situations is important for us to progress, to have like more beneficial, I guess like initiatives and actions for our well-being in the future.
Building off of Brandon's point, you know, as a student of color, when I see DEI program, my knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, what can I drop then? If you want me to do this, can you find somewhere in my calendar that I should cut and and deprioritize? Because we still are coming from this maybe unconscious motivation of productivity despite the time. And I think for me, what I've been working on is activating back brain and less so the front brain. And that means like doing creative projects, doing things that actually make me smile, sing for the heck of it, practice music, hang out with friends or call friends on the phone, just to be able to like encourage myself to laugh, to have a different chemical response in my body that's other than anxiety and nervousness. So really truly activating the back brain, whether it's using bilateral simulation, walking, tapping, some cognitive behavioral therapy techniques that will help encourage settling down of the nervous system. And I really truly believe in co-regulation. And so my one piece of I'm not going to say advice, but my story is I truly activated my community this past year. And in reaching out to my community as part of co-regulation, because this idea of doing it on your own, individualistic ideas, based solutions don't really work for me. I'm Asian. I grew up in a collective-based upbringing, and I believe in relying on your community to cry on their shoulders, because that's what we've been doing for centuries as self-soothing and to support one another. So I just went back to the basics in terms of that, not try to overthink it, because as a person with anxiety, that's what we do. We ruminate and we overthink things. So going back into the back brains and, I truly encourage, for me, what has really helped is instead of trying to logically rationalize what is right and what's wrong, is it possible to think about the concept in terms of both and? Can you be both angry and grateful? Because I think as an Asian woman, I definitely experienced double binds, triple binds, and there's just this constant culture messages of, not being able to win in some regards. And so I try to maybe open my mind to some other conceptualizations of topics. And that means like, for me, I use both and a lot. And I also I'm trying to practice open and honest questions when I'm working with other people. For example, my brother, who have different political views, it's very easy to be triggered. And one mode of communication that I'm practicing with him, and not always successful, is open and honest questions, non-leading questions, just trying to be a really good listener, to truly listen and not to have a prepared response in the back of my mind, and trying to understand where people are coming from. And I've been trying to work on just being very genuine with my listening and open and honest question skills. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what the other panelists have to say as well, and some of the questions.
Preetham, I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in on that one.
I just want to say really quickly, I know one of the biggest things for me coming from high school to college was when you're out of your surroundings, like you change them, you're able to confront newer things within yourself and like reflect on that. And so for me, that was confronting more of mental health and stuff. With the pandemic and everything being virtual though, this sense of new community for growth isn't there for new students, like freshmen and stuff. Like you don't have those escapes from your high school mindsets and able to like confront these things. And a lot of people don't even realize they're dealing with mental illness like during the time. Like I think that's like a thing I've seen with a lot of friends as well. And so I think that when we have these like DEI initiatives and like when we have these like mental health hangouts run by the university, like these are all great and stuff, but the problem is they don't reach out to the subsect of people who haven't admitted to themselves that they are dealing with these problems, or like the workaholics and stuff. Like I consider myself for a little bit at a time, like I've definitely worked a lot, and I don't think people realize that like they're not all right. So we need to have these systemic wide changes that can catch everyone, not just having these meetings that will only target a subsect of people open to having these conversations. Like really making sure that like our grading policies, or maybe like assignment policies, or I think someone mentioned like not needing to cover as much material in class. Like these are all things that will catch people who don't even realize they're dealing with the mental strain of COVID, or don't like want to confront it. And I think that can just be helpful overall. And I think it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think you're transitioning to kind of the next question, but I just wanted to sort of echo some of the themes that came out of that, which were, first, that continuing to destigmatize mental illness is so huge. And I think there's so much, not just stigma, but fear on the behalf of folks who aren't professionals in mental health. Whether that's faculty, whether that's advisors, whether that's other folks who really do care. And I think it sounds like what y'all are saying, it sounds like it almost becomes a disservice to ignore it out of fear, right? And so how do we also really encourage everyone to be able to talk about it at a baseline, and what trainings are there at a baseline, so that it's not, like Preetham's saying too, we have to go to these like extra things on the side. How does it get integrated? And so that's really the next question, sort of going off of what Preetham was saying, is a lot of you talked about sort of specific things that have helped you, or maybe specific practices that maybe you saw in a class or with a mentor. But I wonder if any of you could speak to sort of like systemic or system-wide policies. So the question is, as you reflect, are there specific policies or practices at the university that have either helped or hurt you this past year?
I think part of the problem is like the whole culture, and especially in a lot of academic institutions, there's so much around, like the intensity of courses, the rigor of courses, that people in general feel like you can't incorporate compassion into the learning environment. And that is so wrong. You don't have to be a clinical expert. You don't have to be a trained mental professional, but at every level, as an administrator, as a faculty member, it's okay to be compassionate. It costs nothing to be compassionate. And sort of what Brandon was talking about earlier in terms of doing less, I think in terms of like the faculty perspective, it's definitely, there's simple ways to do that, whether it's including resources, having flexibility around assignments, policies, just listening to students. And I think even at the administrative level, the most important thing is letting students have a place to be heard Like, you shouldn't have to come to a specific conference, DOCC conference, to hear student perspectives. You should be getting them at your college. A lot of people have mentioned the mental health break days. I'm curious how many of those universities that implemented those actually took student perspectives into account when making those decisions. Or for grading, like the people have like the pass fail or the COVID specific grading, how many students were involved in those discussions? And it really makes me sad to go to panel and meeting after meeting where it's all about student mental health. And then the ratio of, faculty and administrators students is like 12 to 2. And so I think that applies all across the board, at the faculty level, at the administrator level, really at every level, is just incorporating students into those decisions, giving students a chance to know what is best for them. There's no point in having a lot of different programs or new initiatives if it's not something that students need and it's not something that students can connect with and realize. For a lot of existing services, a lot of around those, it sort of seems like a black box. Like, why does our counseling center open at this hour? Why do we have, this limitation? And I think if students are more involved in the conversation, it just makes it easier, not only to spread awareness, but also create more programs and decisions that are actually for the students.
I just want to echo that, what Ananya's discussed about like mental health days and stuff. Like, I know, at least for me and like a lot of friends and people I've talked to at University of Michigan, they implemented 2 mental health days on Wednesdays. They thought the rationale was that people wouldn't go on COVID vacations and stuff and spread it and stuff. But the reality of the situation is canceling class one day in the middle of the week doesn't get rid of the workload that we feel constant pressure under. We'll still be doing all this work. We'll still be studying for tests. There is no break. Like, getting rid of spring break does not fix it by replacing with 1 or 2 days. And I really wish there was more discussion with the students and more transparency in the rationale behind those decisions. And I think that applies to a lot of things as well. So I just wanted to add that on.
I think another thing, kind of going off, I like the mission and everything, it was just like what the setup of how the university is very decentralized. And I think that has led to a lot of issues as well. Because in my department alone, like, it's very different than the policies that other departments have in place. So when it comes to trying to come to a collective thought, collective action, that's not really possible. Or when we say like, okay, well, at least for our department, can we do this? But then it's like, no, because this department doesn't do that. But then I'm just like, okay, why are we picking and choosing when we want to be decentralized or centralized? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I think that is like one administrative change that like needs to be reassessed, is that, are we going to have like this, we're centralized here, we're decentralized here, or are we going to come to like one common understanding with a lot of the practices, whether that's going to how exams are administered or how homework is graded, all this other stuff as well. I think that has been like one thing that I personally would like to see, is just like stop going back and forth and just like pick one or do something along those lines overall. But I think another thing is that I think has been like helpful is just like considering how much time is in class and everything, and like how is that time going to be best used. Because I personally, as a grad student, have a ton of 3-hour classes, and I'm sorry, like 3 hours on a laptop in class, I'm not going to be engaged for that entire time or anything like that. So it's just not necessarily feasible. But I know for my other degree and everything, like sometimes if we have a 3-hour class, they'll make part of that 3 hours, like an hour is just asynchronous work, as opposed to like being on Zoom for 3 hours straight or something. So you still get the same level of education, same time spent and dedicated towards that, but you don't have to be like online and disengaged the entire time, or like for the majority of the time as well. So I think there's a lot of different things that can help. And going back to like what I said previously, it's just, if we have these discussions with students at the beginning of the semester of your courses within like syllabus week or syllabi week, like the first day of class, and you go throughout the semester, like we're already talking about it, why not build these action plans and action steps within the syllabus at that time to like make alterations before it's too late, before we're like halfway through the semester and people are just beyond themselves and overwhelmed. So I would like to see like those changes happen in like future semesters.
I want to echo as well both of the concepts that were brought up. The first being the decentralization. We see that at least in my university, there's been response with each college having their own DEI committee. And then from the president, we had recently the President's Student Advisory Council be open specifically for DEI. Yet, while it's great that we have this, and in a way we actually have an audience directly with our president, I find it appalling that we don't actually communicate with the other DEI committees within each college. And likewise, it just goes down to how come we're not on the same page of what we should be doing to address all these issues when there are so many issues to address, because then each committee ends up being stretched thinking that there has to be a different solution for everything, but there really isn't, or it doesn't have to be. And it goes down the same for just like exams and how they're conducted, such as for our university, we use proctoring and different resources for Proctoring Hub. And they don't realize that not just the way that Proctoring Hub is in terms of privacy settings, but just how professors have chosen to conduct their exams now, such as students can't go back to a question because they're afraid they're going to reveal that question to someone else if they can remember what that question is. And that causes a lot of stress because that's not what we were taught to do. We were taught to go through questions we know how to do first and go back, but now we can't do that. And then you'll go to another department, say the Department of Computer Science, where because most professors have a problem with privacy issues, they just don't use Proctor Hub. Why is there a difference in that? This should be communicated between all departments, regardless of what major you are. And then just putting in the idea of student voices into campuses, such as with actually how many counselors are there for students. Normally the ratio should be one counselor for at least every 1,000 to 1,500 students. And this is a very large concern for our university where we have 71,000 students, but we don't have enough counselors for that. And it's been a constant issue that's been echoed. We need more counselors. We need more minority representation in counselors. But the answer is always the same. We don't have enough funding for that. We don't want to charge students more for that. Why not? It's been told, and even our CAPS counselors are getting overwhelmed with the amount of requests that are needed. So truly listening to what students need is important.
I think like one other thing I just like want to quickly add in terms of like DEI initiatives and student groups and stuff like that, there needs to be a bigger push. Also for like some internships for grad programs, there needs to be a bigger push for getting those funded, because a lot of our students are doing staff level work without any type of compensation or pay. Like I know for myself, I'm on several DEI committees, on a task force, and all this type of stuff. And that's taken away from my time to study, to work, to do all this stuff. And all I kind of get is like the potential for change, but it's not even guaranteed. So I would like to see that implemented, like before, when you are advertising these opportunities, these initiatives, that, all right, if you're going to be on this board for a semester, for a year, you will get an X amount in like a stipend. It doesn't have to be like a crazy amount or anything like that, but there needs to be something that shows that the university definitely does believe in this work and that they are willing to put their money where their mouth is, or where their action is and everything. So I think that's just like one small thing that I would like to add as well.
Tran, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I also know there's a lot of folks who support PhD students, and I'm wondering, like, sort of in the same vein of sort of systemic structures that either help or don't help in terms of PhD students, if you want to speak to that.
Sure. First of all, I just want to endorse all those ideas that were brought up previously. I really appreciate those. I didn't really think of those, and that's why I really appreciate hearing other people's perspectives for these creative brainstorming solutions, and really should be implemented, in my opinion. I appreciate the question, and I so appreciate, that you were willing to hear student voices on the issue, but I'm just going to push back a little bit and I recognize that we're all students here, all of us, and there's only so much we can do. There's so much power that we have. And I think we've been hearing and saying the same things, like Brandon been saying, for centuries, for a long time, and the solutions are not new. There are more coverage of these solutions in papers, so there's more appetite, there's more probability for DEI-based research ideas. So I really appreciate that, and all the recent money this past year from foundations and, you know, from the government, and to be pushing and funding ideas around DEI. But I want to push back and say, like, to me, you know, it's top down. Some perspectives, I think that we've been getting a lot of bottom up solutions, but it's only so much that we can do as students. And so, in my opinion, and it might be controversial, I believe that it for me, I would invest in the hiring process, the hiring of professors with different ideas and different backgrounds, as opposed to maybe hiring someone whose research you recognized. I encourage the tenureship of predominantly Black and professors of color. I want to see more of them. You know, they're overburdened. You know, when we go after professors that we see ourselves in. I didn't know Vietnamese American women professors existed until recently. It changed my trajectory. And I would like to see more professors for different ideas and different backgrounds being funded and supported truly, genuinely, as opposed to, I don't know, I know there's, my research methods in decision making, which is I'm hedging, in that there are different motivations for decision making. And which audience are you trying to please? I'm going to pause there. And then also just to state that, you know, if we're at this time where we don't have many professors of color in these hiring positions, we're not, you know, maybe they will exist in 10, 20 years, but I maybe encourage an outside consultant who have expertise in this come in and be part of the hiring process, so that, you know, there's more representation in the hiring process until we reach that area where we have more saturation of professors of color. I do want to point out a positive. I was really humbled by my department response, health management and policy. I felt like they really stepped up. They truly listened, and that they asked each one of us if we wanted and needed more time, and no judgment against that. I felt they were genuine about it, and they found us funding to be able to stay an extra semester a year. So I truly, and I found that to be very extremely helpful and supportive. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I think, you know, so much of this is the importance of hearing the student voice, and maybe going off of some of your words earlier, Tran, one of the next questions in the chat sort of speaks to, well, Brandon, you were talking about this too, like action versus talk. And like, how can we harness, like, yes, some of the stuff, it's frustrating almost that we're talking about it at this level when it's existed forever. And like, how do we continue to harness it and take action? And how can folks who are in power take action? And so the question is, as we get closer to the potential of returning to campus in, you know, X capacity, but assuming it might be greater, what are your concerns about the future? Where do you expect to receive the support you need? And where don't you? And what are you looking forward to being harnessed as a result of the last year?
I think part of the last year, because we were seeking for that community, I've actually been pretty active on Twitter. Maybe that was just my, you know, modern day AOL AIM chat. And on Twitter, I was able to find collaborators that I don't think I could have or would have interfaced as much, you know, compared to a representative sample across the United States. I was exposed to academics across the US. And so I really encouraged and spent more time outside in finding collaborators. And I think it's a really exciting time to be able to pick the brains of people around the country. And so I'm super excited to harness ideas and consensus building using modern day technology. Yeah.
I think for myself, kind of a difficult question, but I think part of it has to be with just like not forgetting this time, because like I said before, the stuff is repetitive, it's happened before, but I think like this time there has been, because of COVID, like a forced stop where you can't ignore this, you can't say you didn't know about it. So I think from my perspective at this point, I just want no more excuses. Like, if you do something racist, then you knew what you did, you knew what you're doing and everything. So I just don't want any more excuses. I want people to be held accountable for what they do. I want institutions to be held accountable for making sure that this environment is safe for like the entire community on like all different levels. So I think that's where I'm at this point. It's just that we honestly just don't have any more time or patience for mistakes or for inaction or anything like that. I think the second part of the question is also recognizing that I think a lot of times we try to approach problems and issues by building a team first and having those discussions, then moving forward. But sometimes it's important for the individual to just start making motions on their own and everything. Like, we don't always need to have a whole team organize a formal mission and title and everything like that to make changes or positive changes. We can start that and then build our capacity as we go. And I feel like that's something that I've seen as a student working with faculty and staff, is that there have been a lot of people who just say like, all right, I see this issue. This issue was presented to me for a reason, so I'm going to act on it. I'm going to do something. If people follow along, great. If they don't, I'm still going to move forward. So I think that has been what I've seen recently, like at least like the past year or so. It's just people seeing an issue and taking charge of it and just seeing like how it goes and everything. So I think that's what I would like to see once things do get back in person and everything, and also recognizing that we are not trying to get back to normalcy or anything like that. We should never aim to go backwards or back to how things were, but always forward. So I think just having that mindset and making sure that we are still like being creative and innovative and how we approach our futures and everything like that, to make sure that we are making it better and not just moving back to where we were, because that'll just lead to the repetition of a lot of these issues as well.
I think another thing I want to see, I mean, Brendan sort of touched about this in terms of like having it not be a one-time thing, but even just continued engagement around mental health. Right now, it's so easy to sort of get involved because mental health is trendy, if you will. You know, everyone wants to talk about it. It's this big hype issue. But even after the trend is gone, even after the social hype is gone, even when things move back to closer to normalcy, when we go back on campus, are people still talking about it? Are people still working on it? And that's what I really want to see, is that it's not just a one-time thing. It's not just while students are complaining about it, we'll deal with it. It should be a continued like sort of movement really to incorporate student perspectives and also actual action. And I think that also goes back to something Tran had mentioned about the top-down approach versus the bottom-up. And I think in a lot of these universities, a lot of these communities, both sort of exist in different ways. And I think they really need to almost work together. The students have a lot of the ideas, they have a lot of the passion, the energy, they really understand more of what students actually need. But then Tran was right that I think a lot of the power, a lot of the decision-making, a lot of the money really exists at the top. And finding ways to work together, whether it's in simple ways like having compensation, elevating student voices. I really think there needs to be some sort of blend of the two, because otherwise you have the same thing going on again and again, where student advocates are pushing as hard as they can, new movements are starting up, and there's just a disconnect. Or likewise, you have it from the top only, where there's sort of a tone deaf approach, or they don't even understand what it is that students need.
I agree in that there is more power from the top down approach, where at the end of the day, there shouldn't need to be a crisis to happen for us to address these issues. We shouldn't have to wait for an incident to happen for our university president to email something about it. And we'll get these small blurbs of emails and messages that try to convey empathy to us. At the end of the day, it only happens after the worst has happened. And I think having that type of transparency where they're constantly aware of what's going on, both in the student community and outside the community, and just continually trying to convey messages of hope and continue those conversations on anything really is important.
I know this is a more specific example rather than the systemic things, but there have been some changes during quarantine and during like pandemic and COVID teaching that I wish to see continued, like during the regular school year. And one of those like big ones is the de-emphasis of standardized testing. Like instead of like making your entire grade based off 3 exams, one of the nice things about COVID is that like it's starting to recognize that like these exams are not the only ways to show what you know, and like being able to diversify the assignments, maybe make lower stake quizzes, things like that. Like honestly, that's been one big change that's helped my mental health a lot. And I think it would help my mental health a lot during a regular school year as well. So like just realizing that like when these professors are making changes to their courses, it shouldn't just be for this time, but like it can be like for onwards too. Like we're seeing students get better engagement with materials, getting like better in-depth knowledge about it and actually liking it, you know. Like I found myself enjoying certain topics more because of this, and I hope that little things like that will continue as well. So really taking student perspectives in and like sticking to them.
I mean, if it was up to me, I think it should be all open exams and maybe not even graded, pass fail, because I really want to encourage learning from an intrinsic motivation perspective as opposed to dangling a carrot for external validation perspective. And I mean, I think that's one way to encourage humanness as opposed to productivity. But I, again, I endorse all these ideas. And one thing, maybe one direct recommendation that I have is to put money behind all of it. Money and support, whether it's giving GSRAs graduate research assistantships to DI initiatives, like we've been seeing, and encouraging that trend, and support just for some of these individual like award ideas for community activation, community agents. I think it's really, if they have the energy, if they have the compassion and the passion for it, I would love to. If I had the money, I would put money behind you, Brandon, and let's see where you go. And each one of you as well. And so I, encourage money behind some of these initiatives. Really, actually, in my opinion, it speaks volumes about where you put your investments. Tells me where you are prioritizing your initiatives.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I also want to add one last thing to that I also think there needs to be money behind a lot of faculty training. Faculty is like the front lines of interacting with students, especially now in COVID, where people are so disconnected and removed from their peers. Faculty are sometimes the people who deal with students the most, and just, gatekeeper training, basic training around empathy, whether it's like a list of different well-being policies, ways to incorporate compassion into the learning environment. Like, I think there definitely needs to be an emphasis also on the faculty role in this.
I also wanted to add something as well, where Zoom fatigue is real, but something else that I've also noticed as a trend is that lots of students also enjoy having some of their classes as hybrid or online, because they can put more time towards activities that they care about as well beyond their academics. So if universities can continue to find a way, even as we transition back to in-person, I know my university is planning to do that, to continue that hybrid format, I think some students will appreciate it more than is expected beyond like what it means for COVID.
I just want to add real quickly to Gila's point. It's done wonders in terms of accessibility, like some of the online stuff, and I hope that those things aren't taken away. So.
Yeah, I think so many of you are speaking to the idea that it has to be an integration of how we support student mental health and well-being into how we even define success and productivity. It can't be something that's on the side. It has to be part of it. And how do we find these practices and policies that build students up? And I think some of the examples you're sharing are just so right on. One more question. We have about 9 minutes left. So one more question that's similar is, do you have any specific recommendations or resources on how students can approach faculty, advisors, research group members to start conversations on how to sort of bring in more compassion and empathy? And again, I feel like that's bottom up, so you could also answer it from top down too.
I was part of a leadership training program in which they started the leadership course with Leadership from Within, and they really encouraged us to go within and recognize or at least learn our biases and work on them. So, there's only so much that I can do to change other people's behaviors, but I don't know how to say this. So I'll just say it. I encourage professors to also seek therapy. I encourage everyone to be in therapy. If you work on your own stuff, maybe you won't project it onto other people's stuff. So that's my 10 cents.
I just want to say really quickly, when students try having these conversations with professors sometimes, it's so easy to tie yourself to your syllabi and stuff that you take it as a personal affront to your course and stuff. And I think it's just like an increased transparency that like students aren't trying to come for your work or something. We're just trying to bring like real problems and stuff. And I've seen that with deadlines and stuff. I've tried raising concerns and got an insane back pressure, like a direct response, but then slowly they realize I'm not trying to attack them. I'm trying to just say things that would be better for everyone. And so just like opening platforms like 10 minutes after class for these type of conversations and making it clear that you're open to hearing suggestions and stuff, and not it doesn't have to be confrontational at all, but that's like a really important thing to emphasize.
Yeah, and I would say, honestly, I think these conversations need to be had, but they only, I guess like, I shouldn't say only need to be had, but they can only be useful when the person who is going to enforce those charges is going to actually listen. Like if you know well ahead of time that like you don't want to hear feedback, you don't want to change things, like your way is the best way and everything, then you're just kind of like wasting everyone's time and like causing more tension and everything, which I hope people aren't like that. Like they value critiques and everything, but I think I would still go back to like what I said about at the beginning of every semester, having those conversations on the very first day, because everyone's still new, everyone is still like getting comfortable and everything. So you can kind of understand people's expectations for the course, expectations for the students, and kind of like have that dialogue then before things get messy throughout the semester. Also, for some of my classes, we've had maybe like the first 5 or 10 minutes of like some random classes just to check in, whether it's school related or just personal stuff as well. And then also having like mid-semester feedback sessions. I know through Michigan we have like a department that helps with bringing someone in from like one of the university departments to kind of just do like a focus group on us to get a rundown on like how the class is going, what we have seen that's like been beneficial, what hasn't been working. Then they provide that input and you like give that back to the professor, and then typically like they will make modifications and stuff like that. So implementing stuff like that as well. And then also I guess like this is more on the student end too, but actually go to office hours and have these discussions with people. I know like a lot of my professors say like no one ever comes, but that is an opportunity as well that we do have. So we do have to recognize when we do have opportunities to have those conversations. And then I guess like in the worst case scenario, I don't recommend it for everyone, but if you have the capacity, if you aren't too scared, I mean, if you got to call them out in class, then I mean, sometimes that's just what has to happen because something has to give depending on like how bad the situation is. And sometimes having that direct feedback in that moment right there, like of course do it respectfully and everything like that. But yeah, sometimes you like need the other students to also join in and having that moment like in a live session if it doesn't happen indirectly or like over email or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of different approaches to it.
I think to add on to some of the actionable things, I also put some links that I think are going to be transferred over to Hopin. Basically, our mental health committee is doing a whole initiative about faculty training, faculty ambassadors, and incorporating those different things. I think a lot of people have already mentioned some of those, but flexibility with deadlines, being receptive to feedback, having time to meet with students, check in with students you think may be at risk, having deadlines that are in the evening as opposed to the morning so students don't feel like they have to work through the whole night, emphasizing well-being. And then I think even at the department level, I think something that departments can do is sort of like centralize these across all of the different courses in their department. All faculty have to take, a mental health allyship training or a disability allyship training, and that's required for all professors. Or things like having an award for faculty compassion and kindness. That is something that you'll be surprised how rare that is in a lot of universities. There are so many awards around teaching and research, but something as basic as compassion is not there. And so I think the departments also can play a big role in incentivizing these trainings, incentivizing these course policies and flexibilities, and recognizing the people who do it right.
Likewise, I agree with what everyone said. And then I'll also be providing in the Hopin later a bunch of different actual physical or at least online resources you can access, whether you're a student or as a professor or faculty member, what you can use to educate yourself, because at the end of the day, educating yourself on these issues is the most important thing. For example, just to plug, Active Minds has a lot of resources, such as Your Voice is Your Power, which is specific to minority and mental health. And I know we have a session later where Your Voice is Your Power, so highly recommend you attend. Alongside that, another one that I recently learned of was Dr. Mahzarin Banaji from Harvard. She was one of the co-founders who developed the implicit bias test, where you can actually learn what kind of biases you may hold. And then she has a separate website called outsmartinghumanminds.org, and that actually teaches you how to make better decisions based on the bias you may have. And overall, her message through these websites is that it's more about them educating people to just be better human beings, because we have to move away from that. That's such an abstract concept that we need to focus more on objective actions.
I think one other thing I would like to add, kind of going more to the race side, is also just recognizing, like in a positive way, like your ignorance as well, like on the whoever's side or whatever. So if you see in the news that something major has happened, like another murder or killing of like an innocent person or something, people are going to be impacted by that. Like, at least you should know at this point. So just like having that conversation in class, like it doesn't have to be crazy extensive. You don't have to do like a crazy amount of research, but just saying like, all right, like, of course, like maybe I don't have this identity, and I know like this has been a pattern, an unfortunate pattern, but I like to open up space or just an opportunity to recognize that this is something that is wrong and impactful, and I wanted to see like what I can do to potentially like make you feel at least more comfortable, even for a second or something like that. Like with something like that, you just be empathetic overall. Like it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't take too much time to have that space. You don't have to be an expert in racism or anything like that, but you can just provide a little bit of space and opportunity to just show that you actually know what's going on and that you genuinely care. So I think, that would be something kind of going more toward the race side as opposed to just like academics.
Well, we're getting to the end of our time. So this last chance, if someone's like, I really want to say this last thing. Okay, well, thank you so much, Brandon, Ananya, Tran, Jila, and Preetham. I think what you shared has been so valuable and inspiring, and I hope will inspire those out there to really take action in ways that maybe they've been scared to do for whatever set of barriers. And what I really heard so strongly was, inserting more acts of humanity and compassion and empathy into a space that can sometimes not feel that way, particularly in research institutions. So thank you so much for all of your voices. For those of you who may have joined late, you can view both the award ceremony and this student panel later. It will be posted on the website. And just thank you again so much to the nominees, the award winners, and the student panel for such an important discussion. And I am now going to pass it over to Stephanie.
I should know this by now. I have to unmute. I thank you so much, Joy. I want to echo your thanks to the panelists. I think this is such important information, and I know that we continually ask and ask and ask of you, but I really hope that people will hear you and use whatever power they have in whatever way they can to really translate this to action for their campuses. And it's not just another conversation that you feel like goes nowhere. So I really appreciate your time and your vulnerability and your wisdom. So thank you so much. I do want to thank the Orley family again for the award and your support of student mental health advocacy and for our winners. And I just think it was a great way to start the day to hear from our students. So again, the housekeeping, I just want to remind you, you can visit the reception page to see the schedule of events, visit the expos to see the posters from last night in the virtual resource table, and check out all the great sessions that we have and speed networking. The next session will start at 1:45, so please use it to visit those areas or stretch your body or take care of yourself. So we're looking forward to another great day. Thank you so much.